Good night, everybody. How are you? We're back at my house for whatever the reason. Um, and happy Chanukah. Um, Tonight's class can be dedicated by you if you'd like. Or if you'd like to sponsor another future upcoming class, please reach out to me at rabbi at Jewish ERIE.com to take part in a sponsorship. Tonight is going to be a Hanukkah themed class once again, because tonight is the last night of Hanukkah. We lit 8 candles tonight. And if you do not light 8 candles tonight, please do so. It'll be good for you. Although you probably will watch this video when it's uploaded tomorrow, and then it'll be, it won't be night anymore. Either way. Okay, let's get into this. Why the conflict? The Greeks are known for the tremendous wisdom they contributed to the world. The Jewish people, for time immemorial, cherished intellect and the pursuit of wisdom as well. Why then couldn't we get along? Okay. In this lesson, the Rebbe is going to address a simple and somewhat disturbing question. Both the Jews and the Greeks cherished intellect. Why then did the Greeks find it so necessary to battle with the Jewish people? What bothered them so much? To understand the conflict, the Rebbe first analyzes the respective approach of the Jews and of the Greeks to wisdom, specifically as seen in the lives of the two most famous Greek philosophers, Aristotle and Socrates. I hope I pronounced that right. Understanding their approach to wisdom will help us understand their hatred of the Jews as well. And hopefully we'll walk away from tonight's class with something practical. A glimpse into the mind wars of the Greeks and the Jews, which teaches us about the Jewish approach to knowledge. The underlying question of tonight's class is going to sound a little odd, but I'm going to say it like this anyway. Why do we have a brain? That's the question. Why do we have a brain? So let's start. Section A. The holiday of intellect. What is Chanukah? The Talmud asks. Just a brief background on that. Basically, the main source of anything to do with Chanukah, the laws of Chanukah, the story of Chanukah somewhat, is all from the Talmud. There's other sources as well, but it's mainly from the Talmud. Talmud, the book of Shabbos, which teaches the laws of Shabbos, toward the beginning. There's a few pages dedicated to Chanukah. The entire Chanukah discussion begins with 2 words in Aramaic. My Chanukah. This doesn't mean my personal Chanukah. My means in Aramaic means what. What is Chanukah? In other words, going further, what is the primary miracle which Chanukah commemorates? What's the main thing that we're celebrating? The Talmud answers that Chanukah was established to commemorate the miracle of the oil. They found 1 jug of oil with the seal of the high priest and had only enough oil to last 1 day, but miraculously it lasted 8 days. We know the story. Inasmuch as the holiday commemorates the miracle of the oil, the lesson which we learn from the holiday should be derived from the Hanukkah lights as well. Since the main thing that we're celebrating is the miracle of the oil, one of the main lessons we need to learn is from the oil. In other words, from the candle, from the light, the Hanukkah lights. So to explain this, to understand this, we first have to ask the very strange question of what is a candle? Now, if you read these words, it's printed on your page. It says, what is a candle? Oh, which reminds me, if you'd like the curriculum for tonight's class, also please send me an email. What is a candle? What is this question? It's a strange question. We know what a candle is. So I'm just going to explain the question before we even go further, just so you can appreciate what the Rebbe is asking here. We live in a physical world, correct? I think it's pretty physical. Last I checked. What defines something that's physical? What makes something physical? I say 2 things, my understanding. One is that you can interact with it. You can get a hold of it with one of your 5 senses. Either you can smell it, you can see it, you can taste it, you can touch it. Mainly you can touch it. You can hear it. And also it takes up space. It has sides. It takes up a physical, like this table, for example. It has a top, it has a bottom, it has legs. It's got sides. And every object, like this microphone, it takes up a certain space. This paper takes up space. That's what makes an object physical. What's a spiritual? I'm not going to say object, but a physical, spiritual thing. Anything, at least on a very basic level, anything that's not physical is spiritual to a degree. So, for example, an idea. Yeah, an idea. An idea is not a physical object. You cannot hold an idea in your hands. It's not something you can touch. It's not something you can see. It's not something you can interact with like that. So to a certain degree, an idea is spiritual. So if I were to, give you this cup of water, right? You would have this cup of water and I wouldn't have this cup of water. If I share an idea with you, I explain to you 2 + 2 = 4 and explain it to you, you can understand it as well. I didn't lose anything and now you gain something. But it's not something you can pass from one to the other. Now, with that said, every physical object also has a spiritual dimension to it. Every single thing. How so? Again, at least on a basic level. A cup. Yeah, cups are good examples. A cup, the physical side of a cup is this thing in my hand. It's the way it looks, the way it appears, the way it feels, the texture, the size of it, how much space it takes up, the color. Did I say color already? That is the physical side of the cup. What's the spiritual component of the cup? Cup is a spiritual thing. I give this class yesterday. And I asked, when I say spirituality, what do you imagine? Somebody said, faith, and somebody said angels, or whatever it was. Spirituality, again, it's not physical. Let's define it like that for right now. It's something that's not physical. So what is the spiritual side of this cup? The spiritual aspect of this cup is its function, its purpose. What do you use a cup for? What do you use a cup for? You use a cup to drink from, to hold liquid. That's its purpose. That's what it does. And this applies to every object. What is this thing here? This is a table. I see how big it is, how it looks. It's got this nice tablecloth on it. What is a table? What is its function? It holds stuff. You put food on it. People can eat from it. So when the Rebbe is asking what is a candle, obviously the question is not what is that thing that we call a candle. It's clear. It's a piece of wax with a string inside it or oil, and you light it on fire. The question of what is a candle is not what is this thing that we use when we say that we refer to when we say the word candle. What does a candle mean? What is the purpose of a candle? What does it do? And now the answer will make more sense. What is a candle? Light, the function of the candle, doesn't create anything new. It merely illuminates and enlightens that which already exists. It gives us the ability to see and determine whether the matters in our close proximity are dangerous or whether they are desirable. Is the gaping hole a door which leads to the expanses of the world, or a pit which brings one to the world's lowest depths? Is it white or black? And so on and so forth. Yeah, so light, I mentioned this a few times in the past. You hang around me long enough, you'll hear it more times. Light is not something, it doesn't change anything. Light doesn't make something better. It doesn't enhance a particular object. All light does is it brings light. If you walk into a dark room and you smash into things because you can't see a thing, somebody turns on a light, the room didn't change. It didn't get clean all of a sudden. Now you're not going to trip. It didn't become organized. Nothing. The only thing that changed was that now there's light. Now you can see. It's clear. There's no difference. At the same time, it makes all the difference. How does this relate to the war of the Greeks against the Jews? What does light have to do with all this? Because on a deeper level, light, when we talk about physical light, light also represents wisdom because it enlightens a person. As the verse says, the fool goes in the dark, while the wise man's eyes are in his head, which means he has the ability to see clearly and properly evaluate what he should avoid and what he should embrace. So just as light shows us like what's going on in a dark room, on the same note, the mind illuminates a person's life, telling them whether something is bad or good, what to avoid and what to embrace, and so on. It is for this reason King Solomon says that a fool walks in darkness. Wisdom is like a flaming torch, guiding the individual down the proper path. Okay, so wisdom illuminates one's mind. You see somebody, they're sitting, they're trying to, go through a Sudoku puzzle, whatever, and they're breaking their head, they're back and forth, they're very confused, they're lost, they're in darkness until they get it. They have a flash of inspiration, they light up. They don't physically light up. There doesn't like light shining off of their face. But we use the expression because the two are actually related. Light and wisdom are synonymous. So let's focus on this topic of where wisdom plays a very huge role in the Chanukah story. In fact, the whole war was about wisdom, as we will soon see. Section B, the great distinction. Why were there two nations fighting? Says the Rebbe. Now, the Greeks were a very intellectually advanced nation. They are well known in history, as mentioned in the works of Hasidus as well, to have been heavily engaged in the pursuit of wisdom. The Jews were also a very intellectually minded nation, constantly in the pursuit of wisdom, as the verse says, "For this is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the nations." That being the case, that both nations, the Jews and the Greeks, highly treasured the pursuit of wisdom, why did they clash to the extent that they wage a full-out war? It's the strangest thing. If you know anybody who's smart, I mean like really smart, those people that you look at like, this person's a genius. I can't even understand him when he talks. The likelihood, though, is one of the two scenarios is correct, probably, not always, most of the time, is that either you actually don't hang out with this person, or if you do hang out with them, you're also more or less on the same caliber as they are. Why? Because smart people hang out with smart people. People are very deep thinkers. They like to hang out only with people who are deep thinkers. It's not something coming from being obnoxious or anything. I mean, most of the time, at least. But people who are very wise, very deep, they cannot handle a silly conversation. It's empty. It's dead for them. They're not interested. They want something that's intellectually stimulating. They want to interact with somebody who they can have an actual conversation with they can appreciate. With that said, the Greeks are striving and running after wisdom. The Jews are running after wisdom. You would expect that these two people are getting along beautifully. And we find the opposite. Why is this the case? The Midrash makes the following statement. Listen to this. Very interesting. If someone tells you that there is wisdom among the nations, believe him. If he says there is Torah among the nations, don't believe him. One more time. If someone tells you that there is wisdom among the nations, believe him. If someone tells you that there is Torah among the nations, don't believe him. As explained in Chassidus, a name is very significant. A lot can be learned from the distinction of the names wisdom and Torah. What's the difference? Torah is a wisdom, seemingly, and wisdom is wisdom. It's all one cholent. That's what it sounds like. Okay, here's the difference. Wisdom refers purely to the intellectual pursuit. Wisdom is the ability to evaluate any given matter, but it does not compel the individual to implement the results. You may know that something is good and desirable, or that something is evil and detestable, but it has nothing to do with your choices. You can choose not to act according to your intellectual conclusions. Torah means guide. It not only illuminates and enlightens your life, giving you the ability to discern right from wrong, it also influences your life choices, causing you to conduct yourself according to your intellectual conclusions. What does this mean? I'll tell you. You ever had a good friend? Yeah, good friend. A good friend that's looking out for you, has your back. And when you're struggling with something, you're trying to make a decision, a very important decision. You turn to them and you ask for their advice, their unbiased opinion. What do you think is the right thing I should do? A or B? Here's the scenarios, here's the situation, here's the details. What do you think? And the friend will give you their peace of mind because they care about you. They want you to go on the right path. There is one friend, one acquaintance that we all have that is very bad at this job of being a good friend that influences you, gives you the right choices. And that is the brain. The brain is very, very bad at making right choices. discerning between good and bad. And let me explain what that means. With just one's mind, one's brain, one's understanding, one's intellect alone, you cannot logically choose something that is good or something that is bad, and choosing it because it's good or not choosing it because it's bad. The only thing your mind can do, the only thing your brain can do, and it's really good at this, is to understand and comprehend and internalize the details of, let's say you have two choices, two very different choices. To understand what this would making this choice entail, what would be the ramifications of making such a choice, what would be the results of it, and what would be the same for the other choice, the opposite choice. You understand both sides. Which one should you choose? Your brain can't make that choice. Your brain can understand both. Your brain can appreciate both, so to speak. Your brain sees that there's room for both sides. But choosing one that it's right and choosing one that it's, or not choosing it because it's wrong, your brain can't do that. Making such a choice comes from something much deeper than the brain, something that transcends the brain, the soul. The soul will make such a choice. One of the words that's used nowadays is moral compass. The brain has no moral compass. It doesn't. The mind cannot make a moral choice. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say a person they want to make a choice. They're tempted to eat for breakfast. Let's related to Chanukah. A person wants to eat a very big, fat, juicy donut. Okay, it's dripping. It's soft. It's fluffy. I'm sure everyone's getting they're salivating now. There's some donuts here, by the way. You can have some. Either that, or to have a nice salad. Your brain understands both sides. Your brain understands that I will enjoy very much eating the donut. I understand that it's not healthy for me. I'm avoiding the words bad choice because in the brain's realm, it's not a bad choice. You understand that this is not going to be healthy for the person. It's not going to be healthy choice for the person. It's going to add to it's a lot of fat. It's a lot of other things, and it's not a healthy choice. But it's going to taste good in the moment, and actually might give them a stomach ache. Very possible. The salad won't cause any stomach aches. The salad is definitely a healthier choice. It's healthier for the body. It doesn't taste as good. It's not as exciting. Not as exciting. That's what the brain can do. That's all the brain understands. Whether you should eat the donut or you should eat the salad, your brain can't make that decision. Usually, it's the heart that makes that decision. It's something deeper down. This is not a moral question, really. It depends on the context, I guess. But your brain can't make that choice of what's right and what's wrong. Okay? I'll give you another example. There was a group of people not too long ago that to them, intellectually, they're very sophisticated people. They're very smart. It made sense to them in their brains that Jews should be killed. You've heard of these people. They're called the Nazis, It made sense to them that Jews should not live. The brain can't make right and wrong choices. The moral compass is something that transcends the brain. Torah, that's wisdom. Torah is a guidebook. It's Hashem's guidebook for the Jewish people and, by extension, the human race at large. Torah is a wisdom that influences positive choices and influences abstaining from negative choices. Wisdom doesn't influence anything. It helps you understand both choices. Let's go a little further. These two possibilities exist within the realm of Torah itself. So these two sides of wisdom versus Torah, these two ideas, even within Torah, you can have both sides. How so? One could study it simply for intellectual pleasure, or one could study it because it is God's wisdom. And in that case, the Torah will become a potion of life, and it will influence his behavior to conform with the Torah and its mitzvot. Mitzvahs. If one approaches Torah as a mere intellectual pursuit, it becomes the opposite of a potion of life. Our sages said that when one fails to recite the blessing over Torah study, blessed are you, the giver of the Torah, Meaning, when we forget about the giver of the Torah, it brings destruction to the world in a most literal sense and leads the Jewish people into a materialistic exile. So within Torah, one can approach Torah in one of two ways. One can approach Torah that understanding that it's divine wisdom, it's godly wisdom, and I'm supposed to act according to this wisdom. Or one could approach it and say, it is really exciting to learn Torah. I feel so smart when I learn Torah. One is the correct approach, and one is not correct approach. That if one learns Torah for the sake of its holiness, that's the right way to go. If one is learning Torah not for its holiness, but rather for intellectual pleasure, the Torah can become a poisonous entity. We'll see this in the sources. Source 1 from Jeremiah chapter 9. The prophet Jeremiah, when mourning the destruction of the first temple, asks the obvious question, why did we lose the land of Israel? In other words, why was the temple destroyed? And he answers. See inside. Who is the man so wise to understand this? And who is he to whom the mouth of the Lord has spoken that he may declare it? Why is the land ruined and withered like a wilderness without anyone passing through? And the Lord said, it is because they have forsaken my Torah, which I have set before them, and have not hearkened, I think is the correct pronunciation, excuse me, to my voice, nor walked by it. They have not listened to my voice, nor walked by it. Now, the wording of these verses and the meaning of them, it's not so clear. So the Talmud comes and tells us what it means. Source 2, Talmud, the book of Nedarim, page 81. Rabbi Yehuda explains each of these verses from Jeremiah. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, what is the meaning of the verse, who is the man so wise to understand this? Why is the land ruined and withered like a wilderness without anyone passing through? Why did this destruction happen? This question was asked of the sages and of the prophets, but they could not explain it. That's the meaning of the first verse. That this question, why did this happen? Everyone was being asked this question, all the smart people, all the prophets. Nobody had an answer. The matter remained a mystery until God himself explained. The Lord said, it is because they have forsaken my Torah, which I have set before them, and have not listened to my voice, nor walked by it. Rabbi Yehuda asks the obvious question. It would appear that have not listened to my voice is the same as nor walked by it. Rav Yehuda said in the name that Rav said, the expression nor walked by it means that they did not recite a blessing over Torah. So again, let's read it. Let's summarize this. In the first verse, Jeremiah asks, why was Israel destroyed? He adds that both the sages and the prophets were asked this question, and they didn't have the answer. Only God himself had the answer. They had abandoned the Torah. They didn't listen to me, and they didn't follow my ways. Talmud asks, isn't that redundant? What's the difference between not listening and not following? Rabbi Yehuda explains that the meaning of not walking in his ways doesn't mean they didn't follow the mitzvahs, didn't follow the commandments. That's not what it means. It means that before learning Torah, before studying Torah, they didn't recite the appropriate blessing. We'll explain this in a second as we go along. Before one does a mitzvah, any mitzvah, most mitzvahs, before one does a mitzvah, they're supposed to make a blessing before they do the mitzvah. For example, when a woman lights Shabbos candles on the Friday late afternoon, not Friday evening. We don't like Shabbos candles at night, not Friday night. It's not a good idea. Right before Shabbos, right before sunset, she makes a blessing. Before we eat matzah on Passover, we make a blessing, a special blessing for the mitzvah. We make a blessing before eating bread, which is what matzah is, essentially bread. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, followed by the the blessing for the mitzvah of eating matzah on Passover night. There's also a blessing for studying Torah. Studying Torah is also a mitzvah. We have mitzvahs in the Torah, but the Torah itself tells us a mitzvah to study it. There's a blessing we make before the mitzvah of studying Torah. We make it in the morning. The Talmud tells us that the reason why the temple was destroyed, the first temple was destroyed, because the Jews did not make a blessing on the Torah before they studied it. Now, this is a little bit strange. Why is this so strange? Because when it comes to priorities, one of the highest priorities in Judaism, in Jewish life, is studying Torah. Learning God's wisdom, implementing it into our lives, integrating within ourselves, and connecting to the divine wisdom with our wisdom, or our wisdom to the divine wisdom. It's on the highest rungs. So what's the big deal if they didn't make a blessing beforehand? The main thing is they did the main thing. They studied Torah. That's exactly the point, though. Torah is not a philosophy book for an intellectual person to read and enjoy. It's Hashem's wisdom given to us so we can conduct ourselves properly. When a person fails to bless Hashem before learning Torah, they are implying that the learning is merely an intellectual pursuit. God is not involved in the picture. This can be very dangerous, spiritually and ultimately physically as well. You see, the temple was destroyed. Think about it like this. Let's say there's a husband and wife, right? And in the morning, after they sleep, the husband gets up first, let's say, and the wife comes out later, and before she says a word out of her mouth, he starts talking to her about some technical thing in the household. No good morning. No hi, how are you? No, how was your sleep? None of that. Right to business. And she gets very hurt. Well, why would she get so hurt? He didn't say hi. Hi is 2 letters. H-I. What's the big deal? Okay. But the main thing is to have a conversation between the two of them. They should talk to each other. Isn't that the main thing? Yes, it's important that they should talk to each other, but without that hi, it's clear that this husband comes from a place of, you don't really matter to me. Your well-being, you as a person. It's a similar thing here. We're married to Hashem. We are there's a famous analogy that when God gave us the Torah on Mount Sinai, He betrothed us as a wife. That Hashem is the husband, we're the wife. So it's a similar thing. When a Jew fails to bless Hashem before studying his Torah, he's strongly implying, giving off the message, and he's coming from a place of that Hashem is not really part of my Torah study, and that's a big problem. Source 3, Bayit Chadash, known as the Bach, is a commentary on the original version, I guess, of the Code of Jewish Law, known as the Tur. The Bach explains the importance of reciting this blessing. He says, this is very perplexing. Why were they meted such a severe punishment for the seemingly minor transgression of failing to recite the blessing for Torah study? He asked this question, this famous question. It seems that the real point, this is the answer, is that we should be studying Torah to unite our souls with the spirituality and the holiness of Torah's source. Torah's source is Hashem. God gave us the Torah as an eternal gift so that our souls and our bodies, our 248 limbs and 365 sinews, should cleave to the 248 mitzvahs and the 365 prohibitions. But at that point, they transgressed this rule. They study Torah for their own mundane pleasures, to understand the laws for the sake of their business practices, or to demonstrate their brilliance. They didn't intend to cleave to the Torah's holiness and spirituality and to bring the divine presence into this world. Fine. So we say these two sides, these two dimensions, Torah versus, let's call it human wisdom. From this discussion so far, it seems that what we're trying to say is Torah is holy, it's divine, it's good. Wisdom of the rest of the world, human wisdom is something to be looked down upon. It has no value. That's kind of the message. Comes the Rebbe and says, slow down. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It has value, for sure, as we'll see right now. Wisdom among the nations. Source 4, Maimonides, the laws of sanctifying the new month. Sanctifying the new month, these laws are of the most complicated laws in Maimonides' book of Jewish law, known as the Mishnah Torah. And he says what we're about to read toward the end of those laws. Very complicated stuff, very deep mathematics and geometry, if that's the right word. Astrology, to understand when to bless the new month, and so on and so forth. It involves many complicated calculations of how the moon runs and how the sun works and how the solar system all works around each other. Says the Rambam, says Maimonides, the rationales for all these calculations and the reasons why this number are added, why subtractions are made, how all these concepts are known, and the proofs for each of these principles are the subject of the wisdom of astronomy and geometry, concerning which the Greeks wrote many books, and these are presently in the hands of sages. But the texts written by the sages of Israel in the age of the prophets from the tribe of Yisachar have not been transmitted to us. In other words, the calculations, the mathematical and astronomy, calculations that Maimonides presents as to understand the calculation of how to see when the new month will occur, is all based on Greek wisdom. The Jewish sages from ancient Israel, they had greater wisdom when it came to this subject, but it became lost over time. Maimonides is saying that these laws that I'm presenting to you is based on the wisdom that we have from the Greeks. This is Maimonides' book of Jewish law is Jewish law, it's Torah. And he's saying that this particular area comes from Greek wisdom. Why? How does that work? Nevertheless, he says, since these concepts mentioned earlier can be proven in an unshakable manner, leaving no room for question, being that we can prove these things, and Maimonides certainly did go through the process of understanding whether this is accurate or not, the identity of the author, be he a prophet or a Gentile, is of no concern. For a matter whose rationale has been revealed and has proven truthful in an unshakable manner, we do not rely on the personal authority of the individual who made these statements or taught these concepts, but on the proofs he presented and the reasons he made known. In other words, if the thing is true and it's accurate, and we see that it's true and accurate, is the main point, it doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't matter who authored it, as long as we see that it's true. Because it's about the concept, it's about the knowledge, the wisdom, not about the professor of said wisdom. Says the Rebbe further, the Torah of truth states that there is wisdom among the nations, as we said earlier, to the extent that these wisdoms are to be consulted in certain matters, such as medical advice. The Torah recognizes the expertise of even a non-Jewish physician. The Torah also recognized the field of astronomy. Maimonides writes that some of the calculations for the Jewish calendar were also taken from non-Jewish sources. Skip parentheses is going to throw us off. We'll skip the parentheses for now. Not for now. We're not getting back to it. We could turn the page. We can actually go further. Okay. The lesson from Aristotle. Nonetheless, their knowledge and wisdom had no impact on their behavior. The Greeks were so wise, they were so intellectual, they were so deep. But like I said earlier, the human mind cannot guide. It can only understand. It can only understand. It can comprehend. It can grow in wisdom, but it cannot guide a person's choices. Despite their recognition of right and wrong, they recognize that there is right and wrong, they retain the ability to behave in the opposite manner, being that their wisdom is not linked to their behavior. There's even the possibility of being smart to do evil, as the verse says, even as the Torah recognizes, meaning that even as the Torah recognizes that they are wise, they utilize their wisdom to commit evil. A lack of wisdom is not a good thing, it's not a positive thing. But what's even worse is to use one's intellect to commit evil. There's a well-known story about Aristotle, one of the greatest Greek philosophers, who was often dubbed Chacham, wise one, the wise man, in Jewish sources. And Maimonides extols his wisdom on several occasions. Maimonides says, this man was a genius. So this Aristotle, this wise sage, was once caught in an immoral act. And when asked, how could such a wise man, teacher to so many students, do such a loathsome act? He responded, quote, now I am not Aristotle. When he's in the act of pursuing wisdom, he's Aristotle. But when it came to his behavior, his personal behavior, he's not Aristotle, because his wisdom was not associated with his behavior to begin with. It's not that now when they caught him in the act, he said, I'm not Aristotle right now. That was his excuse. He was never Aristotle when it came to his personal life. When it came to his behavior, he was never Aristotle. It's only in the mind, the wisdom, the sageliness, I guess you could say. Similarly, another of the famous Greek philosophers named Socrates was quoted by the Chavot Yair as having said, but love truth above all. Socrates is known to have lived in a wild manner, especially with regard to his immoral marital life. And it was a regular component of his behavior, unlike Aristotle, who was merely caught once. They didn't even bother asking Socrates about such matters because his wisdom made no impact on his behavior. Socrates was worse. He did this all the time. He was never caught. It was just part of his life. Aristotle, he was caught once doing such a terrible thing, and they were surprised. The students were surprised. Socrates, apparently, he wasn't a great person, so it wasn't a surprise. Nobody questioned him. Again, you could be smart and you could be evil, and it's not a contradiction. You could be smart and you could be immoral, and it's not a contradiction. However, among the Jewish people, there is a Torah, a guide. The word Torah actually itself is associated with the word hora'ah, which means instruction, guidance. The pursuit of intellect, which illuminates the paths of right and wrong, obligate him to behave accordingly. So again, just to sum this up, the behavior of famous non-Jewish philosophers indicates the difference between Torah and wisdom. Aristotle and Socrates were among the wisest men on earth, and they knew plenty about ethics and morality. Yet they had no problem to ruin their own lives by unethical and immoral conduct. Why should my teachings be an indication of the way I act? There was once a wise person, I don't have a source for this, who was asked, why does your personal life completely contradict what you teach? And he answered, when I teach you about geometry, does that mean, are you expecting me to become triangular? Why is it that when I teach you about morality, you expect me to become moral? What's the connection? I'm teaching you wisdom. Hear this incredible wisdom. What does that do with me? That's the question. This illustrates the issue with learning solely for intellectual enjoyment. When such a person attains wisdom, it does not compel him to act upon his own conclusions. He might even use his wisdom for bad purposes as well. In Judaism, Jews, and especially teachers of Judaism, of Torah, are expected to live according to the standards that they're teaching others. Torah is not a theoretical wisdom. It is a wisdom given to us by Hashem, which teaches us how to live our life. If someone doesn't live such a life, they won't have many students. Somebody who preaches and teaches the wisdom of Torah, but does not live by a Torah lifestyle, the way Torah expects a Jew to live, it's a contradiction in, I don't know the word to say it. It's a contradiction in and of itself. Because Torah is not just wisdom. Torah is practical wisdom. It's a guidebook. It's educating us how to act. Once again, we're going to attempt to turn the page. Let's see source 5, this idea from the Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan emphasizes this point in the following teaching about the most appropriate teacher. Rabbi Yochanan said as follows, what is the meaning of which is written? For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek Torah at his mouth. Why should they seek Torah at his mouth? For he is a messenger. Hebrew is malach of the Lord of hosts. What does this verse mean? Specifically the last part, that they should seek Torah from his mouth, because he is a messenger. He is a, quote, as the verse refers to him, malach, translated here as messenger, of the Lord of hosts. Answers Rabbi Yochanan, this verse teaches that if the teacher is similar to an angel, which is the regular meaning of the word malach in Hebrew, of the Lord, if he is similar to an angel of the Lord, then seek Torah from his mouth. But if not, do not seek Torah from his mouth. Okay. If you know anything about Greek mythology, I don't know much about it, but you'll appreciate this section very much, the last section. And honestly, even if you don't, you'll also appreciate it. The wild mythologies. What is primary and what is secondary? Why the distinction, says the Rebbe? If both the Greeks and the Jewish people value the pursuit of intellect, why are they different from each other? The question is, okay, we see that Jews, the Greeks looked at wisdom and the Jews looked at wisdom, and they had two different sets of glasses. The Greeks saw it one way. They wanted to enjoy the intellectual pursuit, and the Jews weren't looking for intellectual pursuit. Why? Where were they coming from? What was their approach? Where were they coming from that therefore they had these different mindsets? The difference is in their approach to wisdom. How do you look at wisdom? In the Jewish approach, action is the primary goal. The first and foremost priority is to behave according to the dictates of Torah and mitzvahs. And this is why we study. To know which deeds to embrace and which to avoid. The pursuit of knowledge is only a means to an end to be practically applied to our lives. It is therefore impossible for a Jew to use this wisdom to commit evil, because the first foundation is that one must behave according to Torah's dictates, and that the entire existence of intellect is only here to serve the purposes differentiating between good and bad. Such wisdom cannot be perverted into an evil one, because that is the entire goal of the wisdom, is to solely to influence his behavior for the better. This isn't true of Greek wisdom or human wisdom at large. There, the first foundation is the value of the intellect alone. Therefore, when it comes to one's personal behavior, a person can remain selfish and untamed, blinded by his lusts, and fully engaged in the pursuit of pleasure. Even if such a person desires to follow the dictates of his intellect, his desires can overpower him. They aren't impressed by intellectual arguments and can even twist those arguments to serve the opposite purpose. In other words, what the Jews' approach is, the Greeks have it backwards. Let's put it that way. The Jewish approach to wisdom, to divine wisdom, to Torah wisdom, or wisdom in general, actually, is action takes priority. Behavior takes priority. That's the main thing. As the sages say, Hama'aseh hu ha'ikar, that the main thing is action. With all the Torah study, with all the great intellect, with all the wisdom, it must boil down to action. It must educate me how to be a better Jew. Practically, not just in theory. And that's where we're coming from. When we're studying Talmud and we're studying Jewish law, we're not learning to become great professors and become great wise sages. The purpose why we're supposed to learn, doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean everybody abides to this, but this is why we're supposed to learn, is to know what to do, to know how to act. It's supposed to make a practical change in my life. Whereas the Greeks, their approach to wisdom was very different. It was the opposite. The main thing is the wisdom. Behavior. Big deal. Behavior, whatever. Who cares what the behavior looks like? The main thing is the wisdom. The main thing is the smarts, the intellect. And this explains why they have many gods. This approach stems from another issue. The Jewish approach, that the most important element is the resulting action, doesn't stem from an intellectual conviction. Meaning, that Jews, the approach, the proper Jewish approach, is action is the main thing. Therefore, I'm learning as a tool, I'm studying as a tool to know how to act. That whole thing is not an intellectual conviction. It's not something that Jews arrived at intellectually. It makes sense that this is what we should do. Rather, it stems from a dedication to God, whom we recognize to transcend all other existences. As he is commonly called in Yiddish, der Eibishter. Eibishter means the one above. He transcends everything, anything and everything. If we are to declare intellect as the greatest of all creations, God will remain higher than that. The entire world, God is higher than it. The entire universe, God is still higher than it. And everything it contains. With that in mind, behavior is a priority and foundation in our approach simply because God determined it to be so. With that foundation, we can proceed to pursue knowledge and determine right from wrong and so on and so forth. And this foundation should influence all studies, secular pursuits as well, to follow the same path. This wasn't the case among the nations. They too had a concept of godliness, but that was not the first and foremost foundation. It was a result and an outgrowth of their own desires. There were therefore many gods among them, being that there are many different wants and desires. The deities were many and varied as well. This is why also their gods are involved in theft, promiscuity, and crime, as told over in their religious mythologies, which a Jew is forbidden to study, by the way. Their gods are outgrowths of their own desires, and they therefore resemble those desires perfectly. So the same difference between the wisdom of the Jew and the Greek is evident in the difference between the God of Israel and their fake gods. Jews have one God, one, that's it. Every Jewish child knows that this God is someone we cannot possibly comprehend, and that regardless of our understanding, we are to follow his commandments, his will. But for an idol worshiper, it's the other way around. God is a product of one's ideas, one's feelings. The idol worshiper will project his desires in the God he has formed for himself, and that is why their gods seem to be perpetually involved in some form of theft or marital impropriety, improperness. Let's put it this way. Let's say a Jew is studying Torah. And a Jew, let's use a very basic example, okay? Torah tells us, it's one of the 10 Commandments, famous. Do not make or serve, especially, idols. Don't accept anything as a God, except for God himself. There's only one. Idol worship is off the chart, off the record, not even up for discussion. Idol worship is never okay, ever, ever, under all circumstances. There's never a loophole, there's never a leniency, never. Idol worship is never allowed. And we know this, okay? Now, being that action comes first for the Jew, and that's the approach, the wisdom must follow that. What does that mean? If a Jew is studying Torah, they're studying Talmud, they're getting to the intricacies and the logics behind the different ideas, and they, based on their way they're understanding what they're learning in Talmud, they understand. It makes sense in their brain that in this particular circumstance, it's okay to serve an idol. They will catch themselves and they will say, no, I must have made a mistake, because you can't serve idols. It must be I made a mistake. Must be. There's no other way to look at it. He'll go back, try again, and he'll see the right way to understand it. Anybody else, whatever they're learning, whether wisdom they're learning, the action, they're not thinking about the action. They're thinking about the wisdom. They have the wisdom. And the wisdom might even, like, they might understand it's okay to do A, B, and C, even if A, B, and C is not so kosher. Let's finish off. The real meaning of the war. That was the war between the Greeks and the Jews. The Greeks definitely valued intellect, but it was in direct contradiction to the Jewish approach to wisdom. The Greeks valued wisdom as an end in itself, one which wasn't specifically associated with a specific mode of behavior. On a practical level, a person was free to behave as he saw fit without taking others into consideration. If another person disturbed him, there was nothing stopping him from freeing himself of the nuisance, even if he needed to resort to murder, God forbid. That was the basis of the ideological war and very physical war of the Greeks against the Jews. This is the miracle of Chanukah, that the Hasmoneans, pronounce it right, overcame the Greeks, were victorious, and found one jug of oil with the seal of the high priest with which to light the menorah. This wasn't just any oil, a wisdom which isn't necessarily associated with human behavior, but an oil with the seal of the high priest, which symbolizes the pursuit of wisdom, which is sanctified with the goal of bettering human behavior. This is the meaning of the Torah. It doesn't only light up the room to show us what is a door and what is a pit. It influences us to behave according to our intellect and to transform the obstacle into something productive. So, to end off, this is why the Greeks went to war with the Jews. Although we were both extremely devoted to the pursuit of wisdom, we were polar opposites. The Greeks elevated the mind as the most important thing in life. The Jews, on the other hand, used their intellect, the Greeks' most important treasure, and used it as a mere tool to serve God. To us, the purpose was to fulfill God's command and to use anything we had, the mind included, towards that purpose. For the Greeks, this was too much. They didn't mind the Torah learning. They didn't mind the commandments we observe and the customs we cherish. They could not handle the fact that Torah was studied for the purpose of serving Hashem. That is why they went to war. The end of the story, we all know the end of the story, is that the Maccabees emerged victorious. They found a jar of oil, holy and pure, and lit the menorah in the holy temple, thereby illuminating the entire world and spreading the light of the true morality to all future generations. What is a simple lesson we could take from this? One lesson comes to mind. That seems clear to me. Torah is divine wisdom. Torah is God's wisdom. God is one with his wisdom, as is explained in Chassidus. It's not two factions, it's one thing. Wrap your head around that. You can't. God is infinite, he's unfathomable, he's untouchable, he's incomprehensible. And his Torah is the same way. We can't understand Torah. At its core, it's something it's beyond comprehension completely. God is in his infinite kindness, again, as it's explained in Chassidus, and specifically in the beginning of the book of Tanya, God took his infinite wisdom, which the human mind is not able to access. It's not possible. And he did the impossible. He made it somewhat accessible. When we study something in Torah, whether it's a piece of Talmud, something in Jewish law, whether it's something, a midrash, or something in the Hasidic texts or Kabbalah, sometimes a person might learn something and they say, that sounds ridiculous. Pause. This is divine wisdom we're talking about. You expect it to understand? You expect to understand it on the first get-go? A better question. You expect to understand it. But God gives us the ability to understand some part of it to an extent. We'll never reach the infinite depth. But not only are we able to understand to an extent, we are there's a mitzvah. We are supposed to try to understand to the best of our ability. When something seems odd and ridiculous in our eyes, we need to understand, as the sages tell us in the Talmud, I'm forgetting the verse but the idea is that if you see something empty within Torah, you need to understand and realize that the emptiness is not in Torah, it's in yourself. If you see something odd in Torah, the oddity is not in Torah, the oddity is in yourself. You need to look inside and figure it out. You need to delve into the Torah and understand, what is the message here? What is it telling me? What is the infinite wisdom that is behind these words? I assure you, if you delve and you delve and you delve and you ask people and you ask around, and don't be satisfied with silly answers, look for truth. You will find incredible, incredible depth, wisdom that you've never seen before in your life. And that should influence your actions, as we're saying here. Do more mitzvahs. The main thing is the mitzvah doing. Have a good night. Have a happy Chanukah. And looking forward to next class. And this keyboard actually is already off, so I'm just doing nothing on the screen here. Let's stop it over here. Okay, have a good night.